Hello, you wonderful people, and kind of back, I guess. But in today's video, I want to talk about if you're just starting out learning to code, here's what I would learn first and why. In this video, I'm going to show you a quick overview of what those technologies are, how they fit in together. Then I'm going to give you some course recommendations on Udemy mostly, but I'll share some good YouTube videos. And the most important part is why I think this is important. And I give you my take on it. So the most important part here, there are no shortcuts or easy path. Learning to code is hard. There's a lot of things to learn, and you have to do it in a very progressive way. So if you try to learn something that's more complex than what you used to, it's going to be really hard. So a lot of people, they want to get into things really, really quickly without understanding like the big picture of how things work. And it's very easy to get lost when things go wrong. So today I'm going to tell you about what I would do if I were to start all over again. What exactly would I learn first? And I'm going to preface this from the standpoint, yeah, you could be a front-end developer, back-end developer, or full-stack developer, but you do need to understand the big picture, meaning how the front end works with the back end and what does it mean to be a full stack developer. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about. So we're going to start right away with front end. And the most important basics that you should cover on your journey is you need to learn HTML, CSS, SASS, and JavaScript. Basically, building your front end is the representation layer of your content. It's the UI that either statically generated where you have everything hard-coded, or it connects to an API and you get data that way. And when you're learning to code, your most important goal on this step is to be able to build a basic website. Of course, use source control for Git, and you want to deploy it. So the idea, you don't want to create an app that locally lives in your dev environment on your computer, but you want to create an app that you're able to deploy. So you're basically going from start to finish. You have an end product for a user. It doesn't have to be complex. Your goal is just to get basic understanding about building a simple front end, and you're going to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as its technologies, and you should not have some random domain name. You should have like a good domain. Like I have a website called codingafter30.com. Find a domain name for your project just so you're going through this concept. I started with an idea, I deployed it to production, it lives in this domain. And so the most basic thing you want to build is build a project which has a very simple layout. You could have 3 to 4 sections. Examples include hero, benefit, call to action, and form. Integrate some basic JavaScript. Before you go too crazy with JavaScript, what I would say, just focus on 2 key things. Basic interaction with like a mobile menu where you have a hamburger button that you click, it makes the menu come out. You click it again, it closes the menu. And then you should have a simple form. Maybe it's like leave your an email, and you should use JavaScript to validate that. And here's an example of a project that I'm talking about. This literally uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if you scroll, notice how the navigation hides. When you stop scrolling, the navigation comes back. That's some basic JavaScript being used here. I have a couple of different sections, like for instance, my hero, about me, my services, my portfolio, and experience. You don't have to do this many sections. 1 or 2 will be great, or 3 to 4. And one of the important things, if you're building your first project, you want to taste what JavaScript is for. And why not do something useful, which is build a contact form, which is controlled by JavaScript. For instance, if I try to submit it without adding anything in, it's going to complain. And I'm typing with one hand. If I start to enter a valid field, they'll turn green, say, hey, it's fine. And then if you want to reset, you could reset the form. And again, this is just a basic example of the first use case for JavaScript is just to learn how it works in the front end. And the best place to start is doing simple form validation. Once you have your front end and you build your first project with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's time for you to move on. Now, I'm not saying you want to become a backend developer right away, because it's very complex in its own way, but you should build a simple API that your front-end application that you just finished could consume. So the idea is for you to understand the big picture of how web development works. That way, in the process, you learn a little bit about how the internet works, making API requests, sending JSON, working with database. That's the goal of this project. And your goal here is to build something that is simple. Don't go too crazy, but the key requirements, again, if you're just starting out, you already learned JavaScript for your front end. So use Node to build this. And don't use Express, don't use the library, just start with Node just to get the basics and see how it works. And what you want to include in this project is to have a basic Node server, which basically serves the content for your website. For instance, if I have this website, all this content that I have here should be sent via my API call. So the site will basically make a call to an API, and it will go ahead and show all these different items that are going to be stored in a database. When you're starting out, as a bonus, you could figure out how to store your images. But for the beginning, I would suggest just store the images locally in your project, just not to have to add any additional complexities, so you could keep moving forward. But again, the goal for you is to get a basic understanding how to build an API using Node, use a database like PostgreSQL. You could use an ORM like Drizzle. There are many different ORMs out there. Some of the populars are Drizzle, Prisma. But what I would recommend for your first project, go to the lowest level that you can outside of writing raw, SQL queries. I would recommend using something like Connects. This way, you could learn a little bit more about how to implement your backend with your database. And this is where I would start. If you want to, you could actually write raw SQL queries. I'm not saying that that's the route you want to go, but you want to go to the lowest level that you feel comfortable to build this project. And so the idea using Node, Postgres database, basically you're going to learn a little bit about databases, how to create tables in your database for your content. This is why I say keep your website really simple to make this process as easy on yourself as possible. Your goal is to cover all the different facets of what make web development possible, to understand the basic picture. So your goal is to create a simple API that will serve your content for your website via JSON that you could consume with your front end. So you don't have to go super crazy by having like a super complex website like this. You could go much simpler, and it could be something literally with these three sections. It could have a hero, your features, could have some benefit section, whatever you like, and just add a form here. But don't overthink it. Keep it simple. Your goal is to just build a simple website and an API endpoint that your front end, like this one, can't consume by making a GET request and render the data that you have stored in the database. And so the goal here, not only do you learn a little bit about creating REST APIs, you learn about making requests over the internet to get the data, you learn how to connect to the database, and your most important part here as well is to deploy your backend. And you could, at this step, test it with Insomnia or Postman, which are two tools that you can use to test your API. So again, the goal here, not to go too crazy, but the goal here is to build an API for your front-end project. And finally, for step 3, what I want you to do is combine project 1 and 2 together. So your goal here is to kind of get an understanding of how your front end communicates with your back end and write that logic in your project that you build. So in the simple application that I have, I'm going to, instead of hard coding this data in my application, I'm going to go ahead and create the logic that will use JavaScript to make a call to the endpoint and dynamically display this data on my website. You could do it where you get the data, then you build a page. There's many ways of doing it, but for now, don't worry about any of it. The goal is, can I take the data from my API and display it in my front-end project? And all this content is going to be stored in your database. And this is important because as a developer, this is typically what you're going to do. Even if you're not a back-end developer, you're going to be tasked by creating a front-end that consumes an endpoint. And so with that being said, this is going to allow you to learn about how your front-end and back-end communicate together. You could learn about asynchronous JavaScript. And again, both your front-end and back-end should be deployed to prod, meaning that you're going from start to finish to where you have an end product that you could show. And so the most important lesson here is for you to build an understanding of how general of web works that you could use as your cornerstone for your basic understanding to continue on your learning journey. So now what I'm going to do is show you some of my favorite resources that you can use and that I have used to learn this topic. I'll start with some Udemy courses, but I am going to first give you a quick shout out of a free YouTube course that is using PHP, HTML, CSS, JavaScript using a MySQL database, which sounds like not cool to say, but this is what the web was originally built I'm not saying you should learn PHP. I think every language has its place and times. I honestly would work on a thing that my client is paying me for. So if my client says you need to build something with PHP, I'll be like, fine, let me do PHP. So don't get too hung up on like what language you're using. But again, there is a personal preference. I would say if you're starting out and you want to get a job, just stick with JavaScript to begin with. And once you get those basics, you could continue. But regardless what tech stack you choose, I still recommend, even if you just watch this course, Web Applications for Everybody by Dr. Chuck. This course is awesome because it's not using anything fancy. And so what you don't do is you don't obfuscate how the web works. So you're using HTML, CSS, PHP, and SQL to create a basic web application. Regardless if you're going to continue learning PHP after this, I think this should be a very good resource for you to learn the basics of the web. And if you understand the process that Dr. Chuck covers here, you will be able to apply it across any framework, any application. So this is my first recommendation, and this is the course that I recently took just to kind of see like what it covers. And because I know a lot of people don't want to recommend learning PHP, but what I think the magic of this course is that you do everything at the most basic level, that as a beginner, you really get the appreciation and understanding of how web application works. So I would definitely recommend this. For anything else, if you're going the free route, just check out Free Code Camp tutorials. They have a lot of good ones for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and everything you need, you'll be able to find here. So for my final recommendations, I'm going to go ahead and recommend some courses from Udemy. I love Udemy because it is fairly affordable, and you could buy an amazing course for $12, or you could get a monthly subscription for 25 bucks. Obviously, they're not sponsoring me, but this is where majority of my education happened. So we're going to start by searching HTML and CSS, and we're going to start with the courses that I would recommend. There's lots of great instructors, and if you already have one HTML and CSS course that you bought, no need to buy another one, but I would start with HTML and CSS tutorial and project course by John Smilga, one of my favorite instructors, makes really good courses. And of course, I have his course and stuff like that. I have probably all the courses on Udemy because I'm a Udemy addict. Don't fall into that grift and focus on having as few courses as possible and just complete them completely and build something cool. This is my second account, so if you see the progress not full, don't worry about it. I just want to kind of showcase the courses. Once you get your HTML and CSS, you want to move and learn JavaScript. And again, you could search JavaScript. And the biggest lesson here, if you already have a course in JavaScript, or you have a course that you bought and I'm recommending another one, don't buy another course. There's no point. They all cover the same stuff. They all cover the same stuff. I swear to you, I have hundreds of courses and they all cover the same stuff. You're not going to miss too much if you miss a course. And so what I would say, and lots of great tutorials. You know what? I should have just said, I just recommend any course by John Smilga. So let me do John Smilga to save everybody a headache of choosing. And again, if you already have a course, you don't have to buy any courses, but maybe I should spell better. So the next course I would recommend is JavaScript Tutorials and Project and Courses by John Smilga. He has a lot of great courses, but start with this one. If you need a great resource for Node, he also has a class for Node.js, which covers all the important basic concept that you need. He does use MongoDB. This is something that, like, I know he made this course a while ago, and this is not something I recommend at this point. What I would say for Node.js, you could take what you learn here, but don't use MongoDB. Learn and use an SQL-like database like Postgres. I am going to go out and recommend something else for Node.js outside of this course because although John does an amazing job, I think to understand Node.js, you actually have to understand Node.js. And so there's a way better course, and this is the course that I am taking again just to kind of help me get things kind of imprinted in my mind better. And here's the course that I would recommend is this one by Understanding Node.js Core Concept by Joseph Handari, I believe is his last name. This is the course that I recommend everybody goes through and finishes. Very important stuff, because what he does is he covers everything you need to know to be a competent Node developer, because he covers all the basics things that you have to understand first before embarking on building anything with Node, because some of the things we take for granted. But he covers understanding event emitters, buffers, file systems, water streams, networking, using HTTP, understanding Unix, understanding compression, understanding multi-threading, understanding cryptography, all this stuff. And so this would be the Node course that I would recommend, and this is by far my #1 recommendation for Node.js courses. So with that being covered, so just quick recap: 3 Udemy courses that you, or 4, depending if you buy John Smigula's Node course, that I recommend for you to get started. And there's many courses, and if you want me to do some more Udemy recommendations, let me know. But I would say start with the HTML and CSS tutorial projects course. Do John's JavaScript and tutorial project course. You can buy his Node.js course that I showed earlier here. This one is very good. I would recommend it. But if you're only going to buy 3 courses, unfortunately, instead of buying John's course, search for Joseph Hidari and get this course, Understanding Node.js Core Concept. This is my #1 recommended course to start with for learning Node.js. So those are my recommendations. Let's go ahead and quickly review the basic ideas. So when you're just starting out, you want to understand the big picture of what web development is, which involves building a front end and a back end project and combining them together. For front end, all you need to do is learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and build a very basic website with 2 to 3 sections, nothing too crazy, to stretch your JavaScript muscles, build a form, and use form and create some sort of form validation that is done by JavaScript. Then create a backend API for that front-end project. Use Node. If you're going to use a database, you're only allowed to use an SQL-like database. So choose Postgres, use connects to communicate to your database from your API, and don't go too crazy. Build one simple endpoint that returns all your data for your website via JSON so you could kind of understand how thing works. Then combine both your projects together, your front end and the back end, and deploy your application. And if you want to have a very easy kind of course, get the general knowledge that you need. Some people will disagree with me, but if you want to get the basics of how the web works, this is the best free course that you could take. It's 14 hours. It's called Web Applications for Everybody by Dr. Chuck. Just do this course. It's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, your goal is not to go and go through material as quickly as you can, but the goal is to understand how things work so you could become the best developer that you can. And it starts by understanding the basics of web, the basics of web technologies spanning from front end to back end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. For backend, using Node.js, talking to an SQL-like database, understanding asynchronous JavaScript, and combining them both together to the simplest project that you can. The one warning that I'm going to give you, you're going to get too excited and you're going to want to make your project more complex. You're going to introduce scope sweep, meaning that you're going to want to do this and that. And no, forget all that stuff. Create the most simplest basic app that you can, so that could be your starting point. So here's the magic to this recommendation. Once you're done, you're going to have a project that covers the full web dev experience from front end to back end. You're working with database, you're making API calls, even if it's just displaying one item on your front end. That is your starting point. So once that's completed, you could add to that project as you become a better developer and learn about new things. So what I would say, start with the most simplest thing that you can. And as you learn new things, go back to that original project and add those things as features. I hope this video was helpful. This is definitely a video that I would want to watch when I was learning to code. But with that being said, if you stuck around this long, thank you for checking it out. And like and subscribe, do all those cool things. I have a website. It's not an official website, but I just have it. If you want to see kind of like the links that I find important and the things that I find interesting, you could go to the link section. If for some reason you want to listen to some bad music made by me, you could do it. This is not all the songs, but I have some of them here. And then you could check out the blog. Some of the blog posts are basically videos that's based on my videos, but also I have some articles that I just found videos that were useful, and I went ahead and generated an article that covers the video. So that way I don't have to watch the video. I could just like get this quick summary. I could, of course, watch the video if I like, but I also have this chatbot feature, which you could say, what are the main takeaways? Click enter. And so the idea, I wanted to create like a simple way for me to consume YouTube videos that I like and have conversations about them. You don't have to, go and make this your source of truth as a website. But the reason why I want to share this website, this is an active project that I'm working on. Sometimes I live stream about how I built certain features in this website. But with that being said, let me say the final goodbye, say thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I hope it's helpful for you. Again, the goal on this channel for me is to just chat about the things that I've done to break into the industry, not try to sell your course. Like, obviously, it would be nice if I could make some money. Right now, this YouTube channel is making zero money. If anything, it's costing me. But the whole point is that I just want to share with you my experience, what I'm doing, what I'm learning, how I view development, and to share with you, minus the hype and minus the YouTuber that is trying to constantly sell you stuff. Because the whole point is, I don't make money off this YouTube channel. I make money off my job. And if there's another way I want to make money, it would be from building a SaaS product or having sponsors of things that I use, which hasn't happened yet. So whatever, nobody likes it. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you all later in the next video.